I am enormously grateful to be here today and thank Larry and Marilyn for the opportunity and the privilege to share these few moments with you. In recent weeks, both the lay and professional press have noted the terrible finding that for the past decade and more, suicide rates amongst middle-aged adults in America rose by almost 30%. Among adults in their 50s, which characterizes many of us here in the room, the rate rose nearly 50%. Suicide by hanging increased nearly 80%. What these awful numbers mean, how precisely they quantify a rising tide of despair, is open for interpretation. But as we gather today for communion and collaboration in deepening our understanding of trauma, I am aware that we step through a fragile time when the prevalence of human suffering and anxiety can be vividly captured by so sterile a thing as statistics. Each of us carries an intensely personal definition of trauma and an equally personal definition of spirituality. In these few moments of opportunity to launch our shared conversation today, I would like to offer a bit of language that we might use as we weave through the common and private purpose that brings us here today. Trauma is a thing that happens without permission or invitation, a darkness that slips through the curtain, an intruder that breaches the walls of the self that each of us holds sacred. Trauma is the violation that is sometimes the very first event to illuminate these sacred boundaries. It is an undeserved and jarring loss of freedom, the rough handling of another's autonomy. It is the betrayal of an internal organ that suddenly switches function, the trusted hand that touches the wrong way, the wrong place. Trauma is not just the absence of justice, it is an inversion of justice, a superimposed new definition of self that correlates with nothing we knew about ourselves before the moment of trauma. It is the acute state of suffering without haven, the desolate lack of sanctuary in a time of greatest vulnerability. It is the unceremonious dunk in the muck of shame with no clear place to wash and dry. In his play, No Exit, Jean-Paul Sartre says, "Hell is other people." Trauma folds into a human life, into a community, like an egg into batter, diffuse, reconfigured, irretrievable in its original form, and yet touching everything. I am moved that we are hundreds of souls here on a Sunday morning to gather around the fire of this thing that burns around us and within so many, here in our nation of freedom and plenty. We are survivors and handmaidens to survival, and people who have also caused great suffering to others, with or without intent. Beyond therapists, medication, acupuncture, meditative practices, sometimes bitterness, and ideally the funneling of our hurts into redemptive energies, with what tools do we hold our place in the community of the living, the well, the whole, after trauma? I'll call that part of our strategy spirituality. For many, spirituality wears the garments of a particular religious tradition that preordains times for joy and times for lament, offers rules of engagement and prayers for healing, points clearly to a force in charge and the means of reckoning for all comers. For others, such established traditions are foreign or were tried and discarded as a poor fit, especially where those traditions were silent or worse, damning about a one with our particular injury, status, or need. Spirituality is a certainty that our individual experience is not all that there is, that the larger cartography of the created world has irreducible beauty and goodness, that hope for ourselves and others, for our community, is not a fool's mission. None can fully understand the design of the Creator, but to live through the years, to endure, is to see that the infinite variety of human suffering is matched and exceeded by the breathtaking beauty of human love and the loveliness of the natural world. Spirituality is the witnessing that sometimes those with the most unimaginable pain summon the most astonishing grace and power to do well, to change the path for others and feel whole. Where they go, we may follow. In medicine, we have many mechanisms and much language for healing. In the language regarding physical wounds, our first goal is to what we call approximate the edges, to try as faithfully as we can to line up the parts that once were a single whole, then place something mechanical to hold these parts together, a suture, a staple, a bandage. Over time, the severed parts learn to recognize each other, to make a new alignment that will more or less serve the function of the old way. Through the conversations, learning, teaching, and revelations that occur throughout our day ahead, let this be our goal, to approximate the edges. In our varying states of service and healing, let us see the beauty and function of the new self. May our endeavors be blessed. Amen.